Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the URBACT eUniversity. It's our third Tuesday, and can you believe it? We're already halfway through the whole series that we're going to be doing together for the URBACT University. You'll have noticed maybe there was an extra step on Zoom this morning to get into the plenary. We had a waiting room. That was a new security feature put on by Zoom. It shouldn't affect any of the rest of the way we move into breakouts and move around. But I see we have, I think, 240 people on board already. That's great. So we'll probably have a few more joining in the waiting room as we go forward. So today, as you can see, we're already onto session number 5, called Generating and Co-creating Ideas. And Eileen Crowley is going to lead us through that session. Eileen, could I have the next slide for now, please? We just wanted to remind you at this point about the URBACT Toolbox. This has been launched at the same time as the eUniversity, and it's a complete set of tools for you to guide you through your roadmap and your local integrated action planning journey. The tools are categorized in different steps of that journey, as you can see on the left hand of the screen. We encourage you to already start rummaging around in that toolbox, see what you can find. All of the tools we're using in the webinars in this series are in that toolbox, but you'll also find lots of other tools. And over the course of the next year to 2 years, we'd like you to add tools if you find interesting ways of working with your local group according to those different steps. And what we'd also like you to do is to make use of the feedback option in the toolbox. So for instance, the tools that we've been using in the last sessions, if you have some feedback on those, feel free to log into the toolbox and tell us how it worked for you, how you could adapt that tool, how it might work at local level. And in the same way, we have a chat function on the URBACT eUniversity website. Maybe my colleagues could put the link in the chat bar. We'd like you to go onto that website and chat to each other in between sessions, either with your working group colleagues or across the whole cohort who are the community that have come together for this URBACT University. Let us know how it's going, how you think you're going to use these tools, how you're getting on with the Miro board. Any feedback you want to give us, we'd really like to create some communication across the whole URBACT community to keep us moving together in the same direction. Can I have the next slide, please, Eileen? So you'll see this is the intervention logic model that you've seen several times over the past few sessions, and you'll see again going forward. Just to sort of describe where we're at in terms of the action planning process that you'll be doing yourselves at local level in the next year or so with your local group. We've started out with Mary talking to us about engaging stakeholders, and we know that that's a method, a tool, an action that has to be done continuously. Obviously, you start looking at a stakeholder analysis, pull your local group together, but it's something that needs to be revisited over time to make sure you're not missing voices, to make sure you've got the right people on board with your action plan. And then we had a session from Christoph about problems, making sure you take time to really understand what the problem is, what the challenge is you're facing at local level. And then last session, we had Liat, who started to take us into a vision, a shared vision, making sure that the local group has thought about what the shared vision is for that topic, for that challenge at local level, at your urban challenges. So you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got the vision there. So we've built the vision from the last session. And what we're going to do in this session, Eileen's going to take us through ways that once you've got your problem defined and your vision, you can start within your group to generate ideas about how to solve that challenge and different ways of doing that to make sure that you're being creative, you're brainstorming, but also ways to organize those ideas and start to refine them a little bit so that they become viable ideas that can be turned into actions. So we're starting to go from right to left here, from vision to results, outputs, actions. In the next 2 sessions, we'll be looking a bit more about outputs and actions. And after today's session on Thursday, Ian will talk to us a bit more about how to take the ideas that we've created in today's session and start to define them a little bit more, be more specific, attach them to resources and timescales so they become actions that can be implemented in an action plan. Then finally, next week, we'll have Bella on board talking to us a bit more about a framework to make sure that we keep on track, that we understand those actions, how they're going to play out, how we're going to monitor them to make sure that we understand what we're doing, we keep our eyes on the prize at the end, and we can measure effectively the progress that we're making. So that's kind of where we are in the big picture. We're halfway through and we're making our way actually from right to left on the screen to make sure that we've got the basis of a really solid action plan going forward. So in this morning's session, we're going to hear from Eileen for about 40 minutes about co-creating and idea generation. Then we're going to take our usual break. We go into our breakout waiting rooms, take a coffee, take a 5-10 minute break. We'll go into breakout groups at 5 to 11 today because we're going to spend a little more time on the exercise and come back into plenary at 11:45. But we'll repeat those instructions again at the end of the session. But I'm now going to hand over to Eileen, who's going to take us through a really interesting presentation on how we get creative and how we generate creativity at local level to solve the challenges we've identified. Thanks, Eileen.
Thank you, Sally. So as Sally said, today our session is about generating and co-creating ideas. So let's kick off. Today's objectives, well, I'm hoping to help you to develop facilitation skills that will enable you to support your URBACT local group in the process of idea generation process. I'm going to try to help you to create meaning from ideas. And I'm going to share some tools, activities, and methods that will help you support each of the stages in the idea generation process. So in terms of timing today, it's quite similar to previous sessions. We'll have about 45 minutes in plenary, and we'll have about 50 minutes for the group workshop. So let's begin. So I'll begin by asking, what is creativity? Well, it can be defined as the use of imagination or original ideas to create something new. So I suppose if we think about it a little bit in more depth, it's characterized by the ability to perceive the world in new ways, to find, say, hidden patterns, or maybe to be able to connect things that seem completely unrelated. And in doing that, we create new solutions. So we innovate. So creativity is nothing but a mind set free. And I really liked this quote because I think it clarifies the kind of headspace that we need to have in order to let our creative juices flow. But how do we set our minds free? So I suppose the first thing we need in order to have freedom in our mind is to feel safe. So we need to lose the fear of being wrong, the fear of being judged, the fear of being cut down or spoken down to. So the creative space then is, be it virtual or a physical space, it's a safe space and it's an encouraging space. So it's a space where no idea is a bad idea or a wrong idea. And it's a space where we all support each other and accept each other for who we are. It's also a space, I think, where we leave behind the worries of the day. So we often arrive into meetings with our heads full of worries. We might have, I don't know, had a fight with the kids, worry about paying the bills. And it's important that when we enter the creative space, we clear our minds of all those thoughts and worries. So it can be very useful, therefore, maybe to start off with something like an icebreaker in order to focus the mind. But how else do we develop a creative space? Well, I think the first thing we need to do is take time and effort to create the right mood. So it's a bit like having a party in your house. You wouldn't invite people for a party without preparing the food or the drinks or thinking about what music you're going to play. So you need to do the same when you're preparing your meeting, be that, as I said, in a physical or a virtual space. Take time and effort to create the right mood. If it's a physical space, try to pick a pleasant environment. What about having your meetings outside? Or, pick a room that's not too hot, not too cold, maybe a room with a bit of natural light, a space where people feel comfortable and where they actually want to be. Share the rules and expectations of your meeting. So again, you can do this in a physical or a virtual environment. It's important to do this because people then understand how they are expected to behave and what kind of mood you're trying to create. So here's an example of some rules and expectations that you might share at the beginning of a brainstorming session. So make sure you read them out to your audience as well so that they're not ignored. So these include, for example, deferring judgment. As I said earlier, the creative space is a space that's free of judgment. Encourage wild ideas. So you want to encourage risky ideas, diverse ideas, build on the ideas of others. This is really important because sometimes when people start to generate ideas, we become inspired by them. And this was spoken about earlier in the chat, that the URBACT community inspires each other. So we become inspired by others' ideas and we can build on other ideas. Stay focused on the topic, one conversation at a time. So it's important to ensure that everybody has a chance to speak and everybody is heard. Be visual and go for quantity. So we'll talk more about going for quantity in a brainstorming session later. So what else do we need to do? Well, I think it's important to make clear to your participants that creativity requires effort. So some of the most creative people I know are tormented people. You know, they go through a period of struggle, imagining, questioning their ideas, crushing their ideas, rebuilding their ideas, refining their ideas, and reimagining their ideas. So it's important to communicate this to your participants. If people are feeling, you know, exhausted, they feel like they're getting nowhere, that's okay. That can happen in the process. It's a very complex process and you'll go through the idea generation process multiple times during your action planning process. Include visual artifacts. So tangible artifacts or things that you take away from your meeting make ideas shareable. And they also free up your mind. So our minds really are meant for creating ideas, not necessarily hanging on to them. So for example, we think about Postit or sticky notes. These are tangible artifacts. We can write down an idea on a sticky note. And once it's written down, our mind is completely free then to think about new ideas. As well as this, we can take them away and share them with other people. A tangible artifact could be a 3D model, for example, or a canvas that you've worked on together with words and images. Or something like this, which was a visualization done by a professional artist that attended our kickoff meeting in phase 1. And this is a really useful piece of communication material that you can take away and communicate to other people quite easily. And finally, choose activities, methods, and games that promote creativity. And I'm going to share some of those with you later. But before I do, I want to focus a little bit on the idea generation process so that we understand it. Now, I know when I mention the word process, it might send some of you to sleep. It can seem really, really boring, but actually processes are very important, and particularly in this example. So when we have a process, it allows us to be confident that we're on the right path. These are tried and tested methods that we know work. So by introducing this process, your participants will gain confidence that they're on the right path. So ultimately, the idea generation process is designed to get you to move between 2 points. We have point A, which we can call our initial state, and we have point B, which we can call our desired state. But the actual shape of the idea generation process is a little bit different. As I said, it is quite complex, and it looks like this. So I suppose it's a bit like a pencil that's been sharpened on both ends. And if we look a little bit more closely, we can see that it has 3 shapes. It has a triangle here at the beginning that starts narrow and goes wide. It has a rectangle here in the center. And then it finishes off with another triangle that starts wide and goes narrow. So these 3 shapes represent the 3 stages of an effective idea generation process. We have the opening stage, the exploration stage, and the closing stage. Now let's look at each stage in a little more detail. So the opening stage. This is often called the divergent stage, and it's all about setting the scene, thinking broadly, and focusing on gathering a quantity of ideas. So you want to gather a quantity of ideas here so that you can have them to work on in your next stage. You can think of the opening stage a little bit like a big bang, an explosion of ideas and opportunities. So the more ideas you get out in the open here, the more you will have to work on in the exploration stage. Now, the opening stage, it's not the time for critical thinking. It's the time for blue sky thinking, enthusiasm, and optimism. You want to encourage diverse ideas here, risky ideas or crazy ideas. So be upbeat, be optimistic, be enthusiastic. When you have all your ideas onto the table, you want to move on to the exploration stage. Now, this is often called the emergent stage. And it's a time for examining, expanding, and assessing your ideas. I really liked the way Christoph described becoming a detective in your problem analysis. Well, in the exploration stage of the idea generation process, you want to think of yourself a bit like a crazy scientist. You're in your laboratory, you're looking at the ideas maybe under a microscope, you're trying to understand the various elements of the ideas and how they work together. You might be mixing ideas together and seeing what amazing things emerge. So have some fun here. This is where you might want to try and find patterns or categories emerging in ideas. It's where you sift and sort through the ideas and maybe test their feasibility. But do continue to have fun here. You want to create the kind of atmosphere where unexpected and surprising and innovative ideas flourish and emerge. Thereafter, things get a little more serious and you move on to the closing stage. This is often called the convergent stage. And it's a time for strategizing, planning, and deciding. So here you need a more critical or realistic eye. You can't take everything forward. You can't pursue every great idea. So which of them are the most promising? Where will you invest your time and energy? And which ones are you going to move forward with? If you want to visualize it, you could think about it like being in an army control room, creating your plan of action or your plan of attack. So that's the process. It has a clear shape, and within that shape, there are 3 clear steps: the divergent stage, the emergent stage, and the convergent stage. So the message I want to get across here is stay focused on each stage. You can't be both creative and critical at the same time. Our minds simply aren't built that way. So don't try and do that. Focus on each step, do them in order, and give them all their own time. And remember, you won't just go through this once in the action planning process. If we were to draw the action planning process, we would see multiple shapes like this, because we will go in and out of this process again and again and again. But do remember, everything has its time, so do give each step its own time. So now that you understand the various steps in the process, let's look at ways that you as a facilitator can help to support each individual stage. We know, of course, that sometimes a group might need a little help in becoming energized or a little nudge in order to let them become more creative. And you as a facilitator can really help that process along, very often by asking what we call our supporting questions. Now, I've identified 5 types of supporting questions here, and I've color coordinated them, which you can use to support your idea generation process. Now, I won't go through all of them. You will be getting these slides afterwards, and you can refer to them the next time you have a meeting. In the opening stage, you want to draw out lots of good and diverse ideas. So you want to ask questions like, what kind of solutions do you want to consider here? What are the areas with most potential impact? In the exploration stage, you want to ask questions that are more examining or experimental. So an examining question might be, can you give me an example of that? And an experimental question might be, what if all the barriers are removed? So you want to push people's boundaries and let them think a little bit differently. Then navigating questions. Are we on track? Is this a helpful discussion, or should we move it on to something else? And finally, closing questions. Where are our quick wins? What's feasible within this framework? So another nice tool that facilitators can use to get the ideas flowing is reverse ideation. Now, I think Mary mentioned this in her presentation, but I wanted to mention it here again. So reverse ideation really focuses on trying to get more diverse perspectives on a problem. So instead of asking how we solve a problem, we ask how we make the problem worse. In this example, a question like, how do we attract businesses into the city centre becomes, how do we keep businesses out of the city centre? So this is a really good tool for using in order to get people unstuck. And it's quite handy when you have a team with, say, low energy or low morale, or a hostile team. It helps them to become less judgmental about new ideas. Another tool I wanted to introduce to you is the 5 Ws and 1 H method. So I really like this tool. I use it quite a lot when I'm designing new projects. It helps to focus the mind and it supports people to be present. So it's very simple. You begin by asking, what is the problem that we are trying to address? And then you continue asking the other W questions. So who is it a problem for, and with whom are we going to solve it? Where are we going to solve it? You need to put a geographical boundary on it. Is it district level? Is it city level? Is it across a whole region? When are you going to do the work? Is this a 3-month project? Is it a 3-year project? A 5-year project? Put a timescale on it. Why are you doing it? This is an important question because you'll want to get your project funded afterwards. So you're simply trying to sell your project and sell your idea to the funding body. Why is it important to solve this problem? And how are you going to solve it? In the business world, we have a method called 5 Ws and 2 H, where we add another H question, which is how much? How much is it going to cost? So there are a good few tools there now for the opening stage of your idea generation process. And once you have all of the ideas out on the table or on your electronic whiteboard, you need to try and make some sense of those ideas. And we create meaning from ideas by using a variety of organizational methods. And I'm going to show you some of those now. So the first ones that we're going to look at are clustering and piling. Okay, so clustering looks like this. It's based on putting things together that have something in common. So it's a great way of exploring and understanding relationships between ideas. And it helps us to discover embedded patterns in group thinking. So it helps us to see how a group thinks about a particular subject by sorting and clustering ideas together. This is piling. And as you can see, this helps to give us a sense of where most people's ideas are focused and on what is important to them. So as you can see, these are very popular ideas because there's a lot of them piled on top of each other. And we use piling and clustering in a technique called Affinity Mapping. This is very useful in the exploratory stage of your idea generation process. So basically, after a brainstorming session, you will ask your group to sort ideas into clusters based on things that they have in common. You'll ask them to title the clusters, and this helps to clarify where a group's ideas are focused. As you can see here, these groups' ideas are focused in category A. So sometimes a group will cluster ideas very easily, and other times it'll be more difficult, and you as a facilitator will have to play a stronger role by asking questions in order to help them to clarify their thoughts. Now, the human brain is kind of like a pattern-making machine. We're really good at it. But sometimes we're so good at it that once we find a pattern, we find it very difficult to move away from that pattern. And this is a really good tool to break embedded thinking. So once people have categorized their ideas, you can ask them to break up the categories and remake the categories based on completely different priorities. So this is a really good way of getting a group to think a little bit differently. Next, we're going to look at linking. So linking allows us to link concepts together that belong to a central idea or vision. And it's a great way of engaging our whole brain. So we use our left brain when we think about how to associate different concepts together. And we engage our right brain for reacting to colors and symbols. Next, we're going to look at borders. So borders are simply lines that frame a space. They create an edge that separate one thing from another. So here you can see this line separates pros from cons. Equally, you can draw a square or a circle, and that separates the inside from the outside. Next, we have axes. Now pay close attention here because we will be doing this activity on Miro later, but don't worry, I will explain it again. So unlike a border that separates one thing from another, an axis is a line of force, so it has direction. In this example, we are using two axes, a horizontal axis, which measures how challenging we rate an idea, going from left to right, and a vertical axis, which measures potential impact of that idea. So as we can see up at the top left, we have what we call our gold mine ideas. So these are ideas with relatively high impact potential and low implementation challenge. They can often offer a solution to a significant unmet need or a new improved way of meeting a need. So these are quite rare ideas, but they are highly valuable. Next, on the top right, we have moonshot ideas. So these ideas have relatively high potential impact, but also they're highly challenging to implement. So they're kind of high risk, high return ideas. Bottom left, we have quick win ideas. So these are ideas with relatively low impact potential and low challenge in terms of implementation. So they're low risk, low return, safe ideas. And these are really good for energizing a project at the beginning and to gain wider support from people and interest about your project. So we all want some of those, but we do want to mix them with the others for more longer term strategic impact. And finally, we have questionable ideas. So these are ideas with relatively low potential, but are highly challenging to implement. But don't throw them away immediately, even though they are questionable, because they may be useful to keep in the back of your mind as they may become more attractive if conditions change. So for example, before COVID-19 came, we had many cities who wouldn't even dream of pedestrianizing streets. And all of a sudden, that becomes a very attractive idea. Okay, next we're going to look at grids. And an activity that uses the grid method is the NUF test. So this is the new, useful, feasible test. And it's useful in the closing stage. So the idea here is that you score each of your ideas on a scale of 1 to 10 based on how new, how useful, or how feasible you deem them to be. So this is an example of a NUF test based around a sustainable urban mobility project. As you can see, new cycle lanes have been rated 2 in terms of newness, 9 in terms of usefulness, and 8 in terms of feasibility. Flying cars, they rate 10 in terms of newness, 10 in terms of usefulness, and 2 in terms of feasibility. And you continue to do that, so on and so forth with your ideas. So in terms of the ideas that we might take forward here, I guess we might take forward the most feasible ideas. That would be new cycle lanes and covered footpaths. But that doesn't mean that we throw away the other ideas. You know, flying cars, okay, they only rate 2 for feasibility, but that doesn't mean they can't happen. So you might take that idea forward and you might talk to your local research centre, for example, about this flying cars idea. They may be willing to take it on and check it out. Who knows? Free public transport for all may not be very feasible in the short term, but you could talk to your political representatives about it and they might bring it to council for discussion. So as I said, no idea is a bad idea. Don't just throw them away because they're not feasible in the short term. So finally, we're going to look at circles and targets. The Agile Focus Dartboard is an example of an activity that uses this target method. So targets are a useful way of seeing how close you are to your goal. They help you to define which ideas you will take forward. As you can see, you have 3 categories here: pursue now, keep open for further development. Maybe you don't know enough about this idea. Maybe you need to tease it out a little bit more. Or place in storage. So these are ideas that say may not belong in your integrated action plan right now, but they may belong somewhere else in another platform. And so the outer rings, I suppose, can be considered like a smart portfolio of ideas. They have potential for impact, but may not be immediately achievable. So I'm going to recap here now on some of the tools that we looked at. We looked at brainstorming, reverse thinking ideation, the 5 W's and 1 H method, the attractiveness map, affinity mapping, the NUF test, and the Agile Focus Dartboard. Now I've color coordinated them. So you can see that the blue ones are really good for the opening stage of your idea generation session. Orange is for the exploratory stage and green for the closing stage. So now it's time to move on to part 2. But in true URBACT style, we need to do some stretching. So get ready, everyone. If you can stand up, please do. If you can't, you can do this sitting in your chair. But do try and energize yourself because you are going into 50 minutes of an activity now. So we need to clear our mind and become creative. This is a very special stretching session because I've given them names. So we're going to begin by doing the divergent stretch. Okay, so the divergent stretch is where we raise our hands up high, go up in our tippy toes, spread our arms out wide as if you're trying to catch something that's being thrown out of a helicopter. It's something really valuable. So spread your arms as wide and as high as you possibly can and grab as much as you can. And take a deep breath. So that's the divergent stretch. Next, we're going to move on to the convergent stretch. So this is where we zip everything together. We pull everything tight, squeeze all your muscles. So take a deep breath, zip everything together and touch your toes. So you're going as narrow as you possibly can. You're squeezing everything together. And you're taking a big breath in and out. I don't know about you, but I certainly feel a lot better for that. Okay, let's move on to part 2. So the activity today is called the Impact Navigator. And this helps you to identify, evaluate, and prioritize your ideas so that you can optimize your chances of making an impact. It's a 3-step activity and it covers each stage of the idea generation process. So when you go into Miro, you'll see this. You'll see 4 canvases and I'm going to go through each one now. Just so you know, under each canvas, you can find a set of instructions. So even if you miss something I say, excuse me, even if you miss something I say right now, you can read the instructions in the board once you get in there. Okay, so the first canvas you'll start on is deciding on a vision. Now, you have 2 options here. You can brainstorm on the vision you developed in the previous session with Liat. What I will say here is try and pick a vision that you really like because you can continue to work on this in the next sessions with Ian and Bella. So pick a vision that you're happy with and you can use this to work through on the next activities in the next session. If you can't think of a vision, you can brainstorm ideas for helping the city of Megalopolis achieve its vision for becoming a world-leading city for green, resilient, and low-carbon living. The city has a target to increase its green infrastructure. So there are things like green roofs, green walls, urban forests, urban gardens, urban parks by 20% by 2030 to combat climate change related hazards, such as the extreme flooding and heat waves it's experienced in recent years. So pick a vision, and then you can use this canvas simply to place keywords that will help to keep you focused. You're going to spend only 5 minutes on that, no more than that, because you do have to move through the next stages. Next, you're going to go to the brainstorming canvas. Here, you're going to spend about 20 minutes, and the aim here is to gather as many ideas as possible. Remember, this is the divergent stage. You're going wide. So try to use some of the tips that were given in this presentation, such as reverse ideation or the 5 W's and 1 H method. And then in the last 5 minutes, so after the first 15 minutes, if you have time, it's not essential, but if you have time, try out organizing your ideas into categories or clusters. Thereafter, you'll move on to the attractiveness map. You will spend 15 minutes here. So here you assess the attractiveness of your ideas in the brainstorm canvas based on how challenging or how impactful they could be. So you simply drag across the sticky notes from the brainstorming canvas and you place them on the attractiveness map based on how attractive you deem them to be. Thereafter, you'll spend 10 minutes in the Agile focused dartboard. So here you're going to decide which ideas you're going to pursue now, which need further development, and which ideas will not really belong in your integrated action plan. So drag across the sticky notes from the attractiveness map and place them in the Agile focused dartboard in the area where you think they sit best. So that's it for me. I'm going to hand you over now to Sally, who will talk you through going into the waiting room before you get assigned to your breakout rooms. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eileen. That was a fantastic presentation with lots of ideas of ways in which we can generate and organize ideas both today and in future with our groups. Lots of different tools that I hadn't heard of, which is great. So ways in which we can think about doing that. Just before we move into breakout groups, I'm just going to pick up a couple of things that have been in the chat and maybe ask you a couple of questions as well, Eileen, about those. First of all, we had a good point that actually this whole challenge of creating safe and creative spaces, it becomes a challenge when it's digital, exactly what we're doing in the e-university. Normally we would have been together, we could have sat outside, gone for a walk, we didn't have to social distance. So quite a lot of the challenge now is to be able to create those spaces as digital or at least socially distant spaces. And in the chat, we've also had some people responding to that with the tools that URBACT has available. So we have, and you'll see from the links in the chat, we'll put them up on the eUniversity website, some guides, some support, some actual buddies that will help you if you want to think more about using those tools. But I just wondered, Eileen, have you got any response to that in a couple of minutes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, you know, this is challenging for all of us. I'm definitely not the most technical person, so having to do everything online it's difficult. But the reality is we're not moving from this situation anytime soon. So employer optimism here, employer creativity, you know, have some outside meetings if that can work for you. But I think there is no avoiding having to use these technological platforms. And, you know, in order to adapt to them, it is simply spending time trying to understand how they work. And I think, you know, we'll all agree, when we all started using Miro, I don't think anyone loved it, but I think over time we're getting more used to it, and I'm even starting to like it. So I hope you're all feeling the same way. It's a transition period, and we must embrace this transition, because I do believe this transition will lead us into a better place.
Thanks,
so
Eileen.
there is no easy answer to that, to adapt.
Yeah, and continuing to adapt, to innovate for sure. And we'll make sure that we make available those resources and support for all of our networks and cities. We'll make sure you can access that in terms of ways in which you can animate meetings, how to turn these tools into digital tools for at least the short term. And I think you're right, the Miro board, we can see the Miro boards for the working groups are looking great. And you've set us an incredible challenge today. We've got 4 canvases to go through. So we've given a little bit more time to the exercise today to try and help people get through the 4 steps of the exercise that Eileen has explained to us and demonstrated in the presentation. So we're going to move into the waiting rooms in a minute so that we can get into those breaking groups a little earlier to give you more time to try and complete the exercise today. The only other thing I would say is that when you choose a vision to work on today, maybe make sure that it's one that you're happy to work on for the next 2 sessions, potentially too, because we can see that what you create today on your Miro board will feed into the session that Ian's going to run to make those into more concrete actions, and then also into the session from Bella on your framework. So it would make sense now to run with one topic and to run with one sort of idea generation actions and monitoring framework rather than changing the topic as we have done in the past. So just think about that when you start to work on the first canvas today, I think. So in terms of movement, we've got this routine down. We know how to do it. It's working well now. So it's same as before. In a moment, find your personal link and go to the waiting room, either A, B, or C. When you get there, say hello, make sure you're in the right place. You'll recognize your host by now, I hope. Hold tight, get yourself a coffee, and at exactly 5 to 11, so at 10:55, we will assign you to your groups to start working. If you're alone in your group, wait for the others. If for some reason you're still in the waiting room, we'll just sit tight, wait there, and we'll make sure you get to the right working group. This working group is going to last a little longer, so it'll be 11:45 when we come back into plenary, same as usual, at 11:45. And the way to get back into plenary, you have 2 options. The best option is to click the back to plenary link in red on your Miro board. So we'll drag that onto your Miro board with a minute to go, and you click on that and you'll come straight back to plenary where Eileen and I will be waiting for you. If that fails, then you can click on the Zoom link, which will take you back to the waiting room and then back into plenary. So that'll be a 2-step process back. The red button on Miro is just takes you straight in. But hopefully we'll all find ourselves in the right working group and we'll come back into plenary with some great ideas that have been generated by these exercises. So please, off you go to your waiting rooms and enjoy the exercise. Thanks a lot. Hi, welcome back everyone. We're just going to sit tight until we've got more people back in. We have to step through the waiting room again this time. It's a 2-step process on Zoom, but we can see lots of people getting back into the meeting and the waiting room. Then we'll have some feedback on how that exercise went. Please feel free to put in the chat how the Miro board worked for you and how the exercise went. We've got the idea of imprisoning people for having a car. Wow. So that was one of they suspended judgment in that session, Eileen. There were some wild ideas coming out in that session. That's good.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
So do keep sharing some of those ideas. It's always fun to hear what risky and crazy ideas came up in these brainstorming sessions.
Good, we've got several people in the waiting room still just waiting to get back in again. Okay, just waiting for the last few people to come back into plenary, then we'll do a recap. Dominique is finding it really easy to move from one room to the other. I'm really pleased to hear that. We seem to have got that down, thank goodness. So yeah, not spending a lot of time lost in waiting rooms now, which is great.
Yeah, that's not really a fun part, is it? We want to go smoothly through all these rooms.
I think that might be a break on creativity, don't you, Eileen? Like waiting rooms, in general, waiting rooms do not promote creativity.
No, they're a bit of a creativity blocker, definitely.
In real life and digitally.
For sure.
Okay, I think we can get started again. We've got 233 people back in the plenary, so welcome back. Thank you for coming back. we're just going to do a quick recap on that exercise and then think about moving forward to the next session on Thursday, how that's going to work and what we're going to focus on. So we're going to ask a couple of groups how they got on. Please put in the chat. We're looking really nice to see how you got on through the chat. Looks like most groups enjoyed it and had some groups had some crazy ideas, which is great. So I'd like to ask Tamas, if Tamas could put on the camera and microphone and just tell us how your group got on.
Hello, can you see me or hear me?
We can hear you and see you great, thanks.
Okay, great. So I'm Tamas Crowley and it's work group 21 and we are the URBACT student cocktail called. And it was fun. Last time we developed a vision which was about non-motorized transport corridors, a network of non-motorized transport corridors in Naples. And we carried on with this vision, we decided, because it was nice. And we managed to do this in time. So we got through all the stages. We even had 3 minutes at the end to discuss about the usefulness of this exercise. And we found that some of us told just they really like the sequences of these stages and the logical structure of it. So we had this vision about non-motorized transport network, corridors network, and we started to brainstorm that we wanted to make it a little bit bigger, broader. So we thought about walkability, streets functioning as for supporting social interaction, and then we had a number of actions defined, like linking up public spaces, so public institutions like schools, libraries, museums and cinemas, even markets with these corridors. Then providing electric carpool system for the users, and most importantly, we wanted to address different age groups, focusing on younger and older people as well. So not just bikes, but walkability was quite relevant. Social interactions were quite relevant in our thinking. And then we managed to put these on this final table, defining which actions needs to be pursued right. So actually it was quite useful and then quite logical, and it flied, I would say.
Thanks, Tamas. I'm really impressed. That was sounds like a very sort of comprehensive and integrated set of ideas that came out, and also that you got finished and got right onto that last board to start thinking about prioritizing your ideas. So that's great. Thanks a lot.
One important point that we managed to copy. So we kept table canvas 2 as it was, and we copied the Postit, so it's there, and we didn't drag them over. So this way we have 2 canvases with information.
That's a smart move. My group did that too, because you need to actually keep your initial brainstorming rather than drag parts of it across. So that's great. Thanks so much, Tamas. Great work.
Thank you.
And Delphine, could we ask about the same about your group? How did you get on?
Hi, Sally. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Delphine.
Yeah. Well, it quite well because we finally managed to finish our exercise, and I was a bit stressed that we didn't have time to finish. So I have to apologize to my group. I was always pushing them to put Post-it notes and be able to find the right place for the Post-it notes. So we've been working on our idea of a city adapted to senior citizens. And first, it was the last session. First, we've been discussing about the transport issues for senior citizens in the city, and then our headline was get the transport, senior citizen, get the transport, but so much more. And we were discussing about the integrated package of services that a city could provide to the senior citizens, and what kind of solutions we could provide to senior citizens. So we've had an interesting discussion on the digital solutions. So senior citizens could create their own profile on their phones, or could then have a profile and be able to ask services and transport services and also kind of services on demand. So this kind of digital solutions versus human being solutions. So we could provide them with some volunteer people to help them get the services they wanted to have. So we could have some cluster solutions, digital solutions, other infrastructure solutions. So roads without barriers, public free transport for them, and other kind of human being solutions. If they are not really comfortable with the digital solutions. And we had also an interesting discussion on, is digital easier than infrastructure? I mean, is it the moonshot to change the infrastructure, to be able to have all services around you at 5-minute walk? Or is it easier to have digital solutions adapted to senior citizens? So I think we managed to finish the exercise in a quite rush way, but thank you for this, my wonderful participants today. And I hope it was useful for everybody.
Thanks a lot, Delphine. That sounds like a really rich discussion and quite focused on a topic which allows you to go into that level of detail and clustering. So you finished on time, but you also followed the steps of also organizing your ideas, which sounds great. You would sort of bunch them into different sort of types of intervention, ready for the next step. So that sounds great. Thank you so much. I mean, everybody's putting in the chat, and we know that we're rushing these processes. This is kind of the nature of the e-university, that we're simulating at speed, even at high speed, what you would normally be taking a lot more time to do. And you have that time to do that at local level. So thanks for trying it with us and for doing it in an accelerated way. So I'm going to just hand back to Eileen for any last feedback she has from the chat and from the groups, and to help us think about the next session.
Great. Well, thank you, Sally. It sounds like in spite of packing everything into a short space of time, as I said, we'd normally give, maybe at least 2 hours for a canvas like that. So it was rushed, there's no doubt about that, but we just wanted to show you as well as we could, and to give you an opportunity to try out this method. So I do hope you found it useful. I just have some parting comments, I suppose. And firstly, it really is about the homework. So it's not that you've not done enough already today. It is important to take some time to reflect on what you've learned today. So please do complete the learning memo. Summarize the key learning that you've taken from today. Think about how you're going to use it in your local context. What way can you use it in your URBACT local group meetings, for example? And finally, make a plan about how you're going to use it and how you're going to put this learning into action. So there really, hopefully there was a lot shared today, and I hope that you will find it useful and that you'll be able to take it home. So do take a few moments after this session to reflect on that. Finally, before I hand you over to Ian, who's going to talk to you about the next session, I wanted to leave you with this parting thought. So creativity is contagious, so you can pass it on. So if you want to create this creative culture within your towns, within your cities, it is possible. Maintain that optimism, maintain that can-do attitude, that enthusiasm, that accepting nature of diversity, and you will create that creative culture. So that's all from me for now. If you need to contact me about anything that was mentioned today, I'm very happy to talk to you about it. You have my email address here. But for now, I'm very happy to hand the mic over to Ian, who's going to talk to you about the upcoming session, which is Planning Actions number 2. So Ian, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Eileen. It's a really great session. Really good to see some really positive feedback in the chat, and people seem to have enjoyed the process. when we come back together on Thursday, we're going to sort of take the next step of moving from ideas into action. So going from that very open and divergent thinking and exploring all the possibilities to selecting some of those ideas and then really focusing in and getting concrete about exactly what we're going to do and how we will do that. So how we make that transition into something that's tangible and focused that we can hopefully go ahead and deliver, or we're working through that part of the process. We'll also look at how we make sure our actions fit together, they're coherent. So drawing on the bit that Sally mentioned at the beginning about the intervention logic, we'll dig into that a little bit more and explore how that gives us a framework for planning our actions in detail, and making sure we can link our actions to achieving our objectives and bringing us closer to realizing our vision. And we'll, in the second part in the groups, we'll spend some time exploring how to build good actions using one of the tools to help structure that action planning. So next session is really about becoming concrete, moving to something definite and saying, how do we go through that process of moving from ideas into action? So hopefully you'll be able to all join us again for that session on Thursday at the same time. But until then, have a good middle of the week, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. See you next week, or see you next Thursday.
Bye.
Bye
Bye, everyone. See you Thursday. Thanks a lot, Eileen. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you
Bye,
Thursday.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you, Eileen.
Bye,
That was a
bye,
lovely
bye,
session.
bye.
See you.